For 12 years, Michael Harris believed he was close, close enough to keep trying, close enough to keep hoping. He used to tell himself it was just a game, but games don't steal sleep. Games don't follow you into your 40s. Linda watched him change slowly, not all at once. That would have been easier to notice. It was the quiet changes that scared her. Michael smiled less, listened less, and every year when the lottery numbers came out, something inside him broke just a little more. Linda didn't fall asleep right away anymore. She pretended to, because pretending was easier than asking. She felt Michael's body turn stiff beside her, the way it always did on drawing nights. Years earlier, he used to talk about the future. Trips they might take, small plans that made life feel like it was moving somewhere. Now, silence filled those spaces instead. Michael wasn't chasing money, he was chasing relief. And Linda was slowly learning what it felt like to lose someone who was still in the room. Michael didn't notice when the nights became heavier than the days. At work, he functioned. At home, he disappeared. He stopped marking time by weekends or holidays. Instead, his life began to revolve around drawings and deadlines. Each loss convinced him he was learning something, that getting close meant progress. But progress without rest wears a man down. And somewhere along the way, Michael forgot what he was waiting for. Turning 40 didn't scare Michael at first. What scared him was realizing nothing had changed. Same mornings, same drive, same tired reflection in the mirror. The lottery slowly became a deadline he never talked about, a quiet thought he carried alone. If it doesn't happen soon, it never will. Aging felt faster when hope stayed unfinished, and unfinished things are heavy to carry. Linda learned to measure time by what they no longer said. Dinner conversations shortened. Laughter disappeared without announcement. She missed the version of Michael who used to complain about small things, because small complaints meant there was still space for hope. Now he carried everything quietly, and silence felt permanent. Loving him meant watching him wait for something that kept taking pieces of him away. Sleep became something Michael remembered, not something he had. He lay in bed with his eyes closed, counting losses instead of sheep. Some nights he didn't even check the numbers right away. The waiting itself had become the habit. Linda could hear it in his breathing. Shallow, restless, like a man preparing for bad news before it arrived. Hope had trained his body to stay alert. Michael stopped telling himself he was playing for fun. Fun doesn't make your chest tighten. Fun doesn't follow you into the bathroom at work or sit beside you in traffic. He began to realize the lottery was no longer about winning. It was about avoiding the feeling that his life had already settled. Admitting that felt worse than losing, because losing still allowed hope to stay alive. The first time Michael came within one number, his hands didn't shake from excitement. They shook because something inside him recognized danger. That night, he sat awake long after Linda slept. Not angry, not sad, just aware that he had crossed a line without noticing. Being that close didn't motivate him. It trapped him. After that night, Michael became careful in a new way. Not with money, with words. He answered questions without details, agreed without listening. Linda felt the shift immediately. It wasn't distance, it was absence, like living with someone who was always somewhere else. And neither of them knew how to say it out loud. Years passed without announcement. They didn't mark them. They felt them. Michael stopped imagining what he'd do if he won. Instead, he imagined what it would mean if he never did. That thought followed him everywhere. For the first time, the lottery felt less like hope and more like a deadline he was running out of. Michael began to fear mornings more than nights. Mornings meant another day without change, another reminder that time was moving without permission. He avoided mirrors longer than necessary. Not because of age, but because his eyes no longer expected good news. Hope hadn't disappeared. It had learned how to whisper. By the 12th year, Michael no longer counted losses. They blended together. What stood out were the nights that felt longer than the ones before. He realized something unsettling. The lottery had become a clock, each draw marking how much life had passed without giving anything back. Waiting had turned into a full-time habit. Michael started remembering who he used to be, not younger, just lighter. A man who laughed without forcing it, who made plans without needing permission from luck. Those memories came quietly, usually late at night, not to comfort him, but to remind him of what had been slowly slipping away. Regret doesn't shout, it waits. Linda finally said what she'd been holding back, not in anger, not in accusation. She said she missed him, not the man he was years ago, the man who was still supposed to be here. Michael listened without interrupting, because for the first time he understood she wasn't asking about the lottery at all. That night, Michael didn't check the numbers right away. He sat with Linda in silence, longer than usual, not fixing anything, not promising change. For the first time in years, the lottery felt smaller than the space between them, and that realization scared him more than losing ever had. Because if the lottery wasn't the answer, what was he supposed to face next? Michael realized something uncomfortable. The lottery had given him an excuse to wait, an excuse to delay hard decisions. As long as he was almost winning, he didn't have to admit how afraid he was of changing his own life. Hope hadn't saved him, it had sheltered his fear. Michael thought about the years he never questioned, the conversations he avoided, the chances he postponed. None of them felt dramatic at the time. They felt reasonable, responsible, safe. But safety had slowly turned into distance, from himself and from Linda. Linda carried her own kind of exhaustion, not from waiting for numbers, but from waiting for Michael to return to himself. She never asked him to stop playing. She asked him to be present. And somehow, that felt harder. Loving someone who is waiting means waiting too, even when you didn't choose to. One night, Michael didn't feel hopeful or disappointed. He felt tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. It wasn't the lottery that exhausted him. It was the years spent believing something outside himself would eventually arrive and make life easier. For the first time, he saw it clearly. Waiting had become his comfort zone, and comfort was costing him everything else. Michael didn't make a dramatic decision. There was no promise, no final ticket. He simply stopped centering his life around the drawing. No countdown, no quiet tension in the room. Linda noticed before he said anything. Not because he won, but because he came back. Stopping didn't bring relief right away. The nights were still long. The thoughts still returned out of habit, but something had shifted. Michael wasn't waiting anymore. He was sitting with the discomfort instead of escaping it. That felt unfamiliar and strangely honest. Michael began to notice how much of his life had been postponed. Small decisions, conversations left unfinished, dreams he never allowed himself to revise. Without the lottery, there was no distraction left, just the quiet truth of where he was, and the responsibility of deciding where to go next. It wasn't inspiring. It was heavy, but real. Linda didn't celebrate the change. She watched it carefully. Years of waiting had taught her patience. Michael spoke more, even when he wasn't sure what to say. He stayed present during silence instead of escaping it. Those moments felt small, but they carried weight. Trust doesn't return loudly. It rebuilds quietly. Time didn't slow down after Michael stopped playing. If anything, it became more noticeable. But it no longer felt like something chasing him. It felt like something he was finally walking with. He wasn't ahead. He wasn't behind. He was present. And presence, he realized, was something luck had never given him. Michael noticed his nights were still quiet, but no longer heavy. He wasn't hoping for something to happen. He was allowing things to be unfinished. And that felt uncomfortable in a new way. For years, waiting had given him a sense of direction. Now he had to create one himself. And that, he realized, was the part no ticket had ever prepared him for. Michael understood something he had avoided for years. The lottery didn't steal his time. It borrowed it, night after night. 12 years spent waiting for permission to live differently. 12 years believing change needed luck. Letting go didn't feel brave. It felt overdue. And for the first time, he wondered how many people were still waiting like he was. Maybe Michael's story feels familiar, not because of the lottery, but because of the waiting. Waiting for the right moment, the right break, the right sign. Waiting can feel responsible, even hopeful, until it quietly becomes a habit, and habits shape lives more than luck ever does. Michael didn't rebuild his life overnight. There was no transformation to admire. What changed was simpler. He stopped confusing hope with escape, stopped asking chance to do the work he avoided. Life remained ordinary, but it finally felt honest. And honesty, he learned, weighs less than waiting. Some people lose money playing the lottery, others lose sleep, others lose years without noticing. Michael didn't lose everything, but he lost enough nights to understand the cost of waiting. If you've ever stayed awake, hoping something outside of you would finally change your life, this story isn't really about him. It's about what waiting has taken from you. Michael never won the lottery, but he stopped betting his future on chance. Some hopes keep us alive, others quietly keep us stuck. Maybe the hardest thing to admit is that nothing is coming to save us. And that's not a tragedy, because the moment we stop waiting, life finally becomes ours again.